So good morning, everyone. Welcome to this morning's study. And we're going to continue looking at 1 Kings. And I thought the study yesterday was interesting, some of the things that we talked about, and we'll return to some of those ideas. But before we do, let's have a word of prayer. Dear gracious Heavenly Father, we invite your Spirit as we open your word together. We are thankful that you are working in our lives, that you love us and have sent your Son to die for us, and that he lives again at your right hand. And so we ask, Lord, that through your Spirit we can have your presence here. We see the need in this world. We see the suffering. We see the anger and the delusions that occur in people's hearts and minds because of sin. And we just pray, Lord, that your Spirit can come and rest upon us, and that your work can be accomplished here upon this earth before Christ returns. So be with us now. Help us in this study to understand the things that we talk about. And we ask that you can lead and guide us. And we pray this in Jesus' name. Okay, so this is the last study of this week. And often I try to give some sort of summary of the studies, the morning studies. So I know I kind of do a summary almost all the time, but just to get us back into focus where we're at. So we had Saul, David, and now we have Solomon. And we know that Solomon represents the third angel's message. And so we're looking to understand what there is about Solomon that reflects our time. That is, particularly in the broadest sense, it would be October 22nd, 1844 to the second coming. So we can see how there's symbols that relate to the history of the Adventist Church. We can take the 4 years as representing 4 generations, and then we're going to have this foundation of the temple being built, and made a case that could be the time of the end in our line if we apply it in that way. But we also can take Solomon and just zoom it into our history, right? So we can zoom in to our line and say Solomon represents just our history somewhere. Or we could also say that Solomon represents this immediate history that we're in since January 11th, right? So we have these sort of 3 different ways we can take the story of Solomon and apply it. Now, of course, if we have it that it represents after January 11th, 2001, when we started studying First Kings, and we first started looking at Solomon after completing sort of David and Saul, then if we're making that application of Solomon, then we still have to look at the symbols and how that applies. Now, I'm not sure which is the best way to proceed and to sort through all of this, because we have this bigger line that we still have not drawn out of Saul and David. So now we have Solomon. We're looking at Solomon, trying to understand if this can help us complete those lines. Now, the thing that we notice about Solomon, just to kind of sum this up, first, we know that Saul and David are anointed by Samuel. That is, Saul and David represent the first and second angels' messages in our history. And so Samuel anoints the first and second angel's message. It's a repeat of Millerite history. The third angel's message is not a repeat of Millerite history. Even if we're taking that third angel's message, so October 22nd to 1844 to the second coming, then if we're applying that third angel's message, it's not really a repeat of the third angel's message, because the third angel's message hasn't been completed yet, right? And we don't actually have the third angel's message arrive in our history in that big line. But of course, we can zoom into some waymark on the bigger line, and then we can see a line which is going to have an arrival of the third angel. But that's not really the arrival of the third angel for our history, because that we're still in that third angel's history. Does that make sense to people? So if that's the case, and we have David is now going to, with this Adonijah setting himself up as king, David is going to basically pass on, I guess, his his promise to Solomon, or his promise basically to Bathsheba, that Solomon would be king, right? So we have this conflict, this change in the movement. So if we're making this application for our time, we can see where this fits in. And then, so we have situation, David's instructions to Solomon. So we can see Solomon's not anointed by Samuel, right, as Saul and David were, but Solomon's going to be anointed by Nathan, right? So we're going to have David's instructions to Solomon. And then we have the death of David. And then Solomon's going to have his reign set up. We're going to have this situation where he starts to clean up, based on David's directions, some of these different problems in the kingdom. And he's going to have a kingdom of peace. And then we have Solomon praying for wisdom. Now, this would be an increase of light. Now, if Solomon is the third angel's message, how would we address this prayer for wisdom? Where would we place it? How have we looked at this so far? What is this wisdom? What is this prayer? Because we're going to have to find that it fits somewhere. And so he has this prayer for wisdom, and then there's going to be these two women with these two sons. And we have symbols of the third day, right? So that third day, when the other son's born, then he's going to die. Then, this whole situation with Solomon asking for the sword to cut the child in half, the remaining child, and so that each woman could get a half, that seems fair. But illustrating his wisdom, we haven't fully placed how this works. We know that dividing the child in two is a symbol. You can refer to a chiasm, but of course he's not going to end up doing it, because the one woman whose son it is going to just say, no, don't kill the child, give it to the other lady. So Solomon then discerns with this judgment what is the truth. And then we have this whole thing about this organization, Solomon's officials, the organization which we're symbolizing is under Christ. That Christ is ordering events and circumstances in this movement, that we need to allow Christ to do that work, and that we shouldn't try to take that work into our hands. It's going to talk about all these, providing for these different people. There's, for the king's household. And then we got into the preparations for building the temple, and we discussed the ethical issues that arose in Solomon's going to hiring the king of Tyre initially to get materials. But it's more than just materials. There's going to be workmen involved. So there's lots of little compromises or opportunity for compromise that is set up at the beginning. So these become a negative aspect, though in the text itself, it's not presenting this in a negative way at first. We're going to find that later on, Solomon's going to marry many strange wives, which is going to be more of his downfall. But there's compromise starts somewhere, right? So often, the first door of compromise doesn't seem like such a big deal. But as you open that door a crack, then eventually, before you know it, the whole door is open. All the walls in the house are torn down and everything's just destroyed. I'm not talking from personal experience and all that. But I did have a really strange dream last night about the house I grew up in, that it was all sort of, the walls were kind of torn down, but all the power and the lights were on, all the furniture was there, and people were just living in the house. Anyway, it's destroyed now. In reality, it doesn't exist anymore, but it's a strange dream. That's why I woke up at 2:30 this morning. That dream woke me up. Okay. And of course, I was thinking about my house, so I couldn't go back to sleep. The house which I really miss, the house I grew up in. Anyway, so we have this situation then with the fir trees, or the fir trees, the cedar trees from Lebanon, cedars of Lebanon, which we're going to use for the house. And then we started looking at the chronology of Solomon building the temple. in 480th year after the children of Israel were come out of the land of Egypt. So we addressed some of those issues with the chronology. And I wouldn't call it a unique solution, but it's definitely not a common view, is that we count this 480 years, not from the Exodus proper, which usually is where people would count it from, because they read it, they say, after the children of Israel were come out of the land of Egypt, into the 4th year of Solomon's reign, that's 480 years. So they're going to say, well, wherever they place Solomon laying the foundation of the temple, they're going to count 480 years earlier to the Exodus. But we counted to the crossing of the Jordan. Now, Stephen laid out in tabled history a lot of those arguments of why we do that. And so one is the period of the judges needs a little bit more time. It's really hard to cram it in, even as it stands. But if you make it 40 years shorter, it becomes more difficult. We looked at Acts chapter 13, verse 20, where it talks about 450 years, about the space of 450 years, which just in the King James is translated in a way that gives a false impression, as the 450 years precede the period of the Exodus, right? So it's counting. And from, I guess we counted from, Stephen, it's going to be counted from where exactly would you count it from, if you're there? Having to do with Isaac?
Yeah, I would normally count it from the birth of Isaac or around that time.
Yeah, so because it says about the space of 450 years.
Yeah, and it mentions the fathers. So we know Abraham was a father,
Yeah,
and then Isaac would have been making that plural. So certainly from when Isaac was born.
yeah, and to the Exodus. And I don't think in Acts he's trying to be like 100% accurate either. He's just saying, about the space of 450 years, that gives a little bit of latitude. But definitely,
Yeah, it's not until the Exodus. It's until they take the
till they
land
get
or
rest,
something.
till they get rest from
Yes.
their enemies all around, and they possess the land, right? So it's even not the Exodus itself that 450 years is. So, but anyway, we address those details, and so we have this sort of, and again, it's not unique because we know Gerard Guerteau has exactly the same chronology as we do in regard to the Exodus and the 480 years. So he takes the same position that it's the crossing of the Jordan that you count the 480 years to the laying of the foundation of Solomon's temple. And it's interesting too that he notes the solar eclipse that takes the path through the Red Sea in 1533. So yeah, so he has the Exodus, he has the 40 years. So the 480 years goes not to the crossing of the Red Sea, but to the crossing of the Jordan. And Stephen, what's the verse that talks about that? One of the Psalms where it talks about them coming out of Egypt by crossing the Red Sea and the Jordan. Do you remember the verse
Yeah,
that?
so it's Psalm 114 verses 1 to 5.
Yeah, I had 14 in my head, but I wasn't.
And then there's a verse as well you can maybe apply in Ezekiel. It talks about their rebellion in the wilderness of Egypt.
Mhm.
So it still implies, like, even though they've come out of Egypt, they're still in some way in Egypt.
Yeah, they still considered that Egypt. People looked at land differently and borders differently than we do. Yeah, so in Psalm 114, when Israel went out of Egypt, the house of Jacob, from a people of a strange language, Judah was his sanctuary and Israel his dominion. The sea saw it and fled. Jordan was driven back. The mountains skipped like rams and the little hills like lambs. Right. So what aileth thee, O thou sea, thou that fleddest, thou Jordan that was driven back? So here we have them crossing the Jordan to come out of Egypt. Now, in Hebrew, just for those people who like these Hebrew lessons that I give once in a while, you got this word 3318. yatsa, and that means to go, right? Now, you can see they translate it as went out. It could mean come out, right? So when we go back to First Kings chapter 6, again, you're going to have come out, word come out. So they have it as went out. Here they have it as come out. And it's just that word, Hebrew's a little bit different in how they deal with come and go and went. It's just really the same word. They don't have those irregular verbs that we have. And no, all that happens here is in the form of the word. This probably doesn't mean anything, but it's got a lamed in front of it, and then it has sa'ot. So the way it's even spelled, it's got this form of a word that, yes, I'd have to go through and parse it out and show you that. And then here it's going to be, it's how they're going to have, it's basically the same form. It's just they have a bet in front of it. So it could be in coming out, right? The bet means in. Okay. So anyway, the point is, it's not always as clear in the English translations how to understand that word, like the going forth out of Egypt or the completing of the coming out, right? So you can see it can be to go, to come out. I mean, you can see the difference in English. Like if you talk about going out of Egypt or coming out of Egypt, they are kind of different in English. Or to go forth, right? Or to exit. They have these little nuances of meaning in English that in Hebrew you don't really see. So, and it could also mean brought forth, depending on the form. That's the hopeful form. So they could be brought forth. Sometimes you'll see that word and they'll say they were brought out of Egypt. And that's just because of who's doing the action. So if they're brought or they're caused to come out, or they just choose on their own accord, there's the kal form, the hifel form, and the hopeful form. Okay, so I know it's a little bit of Hebrew, but those are things that always need to be considered when you're looking at a passage. You can't just, you can just look at the English and the King James and you can say, well, that's what it says. It's good enough for me. And that's fine. But sometimes you lose little details or they add things that give a false impression. So anyway, we have Solomon's chronology of this, and then we have the symbol of that. So when we get to the end, we can see that it's completed in the 11th year. So he begins in the 4th year in the 2nd month and completes it in the 11th year in the 8th month. And we're going to be looking at some point at the dedication ceremonies of Solomon's temple when it's completed. So we know that it's going to be in the 7th month that they're going to dedicate it. So by the time of the 8th month, it is now completed, is the way that I understand that. So the foundation was laid. It says in the 4th year was the foundation of the house of the Lord laid in the month Ziph, which is the 2nd month. And in the 11th year, in the month Bul, which is the 8th month, was the house finished throughout all the parts thereof and according to all the fashion of it. So he was 7 years in building it. Now, this idea of finished, that is, I don't think they were finishing it still in the 8th month. So that's just we could call it speculation. But I think the idea is that when you get to the 8th month, it is completed, is the sense of what this verse is about. So it's not like they dedicated it in the 7th month and they still had a bunch of work to do on it that they finished in the 8th month. I just think that the completing of it is the 7th month. And by the time you get to the 8th month, it is now finished by that time. It's not finished or completed by the 7th month because the ceremonies of dedication are part of that completion of the temple. Now, why am I being so particular about this point? Why would that matter? We could just say, well, yeah, they had the dedication ceremony in the 7th month, but they didn't finish it until the 8th month. But I'm saying they actually had finished it by the time the 8th month got there.
Well, it matters in the sense that the alternative would be that they finish it in the 8th month, and then it's going to be almost a year before
before
they
the
actually
dedication. Yeah.
dedicate it.
Yeah, which I considered at first, right? That was kind of how I was looking at it. I was thinking, well, why are they having this dedication before it's finished? So it was something that I struggled with in trying to understand this. So that's part of why, I think it's important, because it was a struggle that I went through. But also, it shows some ways in which the Jews, the Hebrews, look at things, right? Because we would say, I finished it we would have actually said it was finished in the 7th month, right? Because it is. But they're sort of looking at it, well, it's finished in the 8th month, because in the 7th month it wasn't finished. So they're looking at that whole month as a month in which the temple is not finished, right? Just a part of a month. So it's not finished. That is, you have a month in which it's now finished, is the 8th month. In the 8th month, it's now finished. In the 7th month, it was probably finished by the end of the 7th month. I don't think they had to do anything in the 8th month to finish it. But it wasn't finished in the way that they understand finished in the 7th month, because the 7th month it wasn't finished. Do you understand again? Like, just understanding that sort of mindset of how they look at time and how they look at parts of days. So even in the idea where you can look at a part of a day, now this almost seems contradictory, but when they say 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth, right, about Christ, just as Jonah was, people said, well, that means he was in the grave for 72 hours. Was Jonah actually in the fish for 72 hours? Do we have any evidence of that? Right?
Not really.
No.
But,
it's an expression.
Okay, but before you'd ask the question if he was in the grave, and then you changed it to in the fish.
Jesus in the grave.
Okay.
Jonah in the fish, right? Because people apply that. Just as Jonah was in the fish for 3 days and 3 nights, Jesus was in the grave for 3 days and 3 nights. Is that literally 72 hours? Or do they just consider part of a day as representing the whole day? So if you look at this idea that it's finished in the 8th month, they can't say it's finished in the 7th month, because in part of the 7th month, it's not finished. So they're talking about a month in which it's finished. So it's just yeah, Stephen?
Having it a Wednesday crucifixion, you just miss all the typology. So Christ, he's the Passover lamb, the 14th. The 15th, you have the Sabbath, and then the 16th, he rises, which is the first fruits offering. So just having like a 3-day literal, Barat day and night, 3 days, it just doesn't, just takes away that typology.
Yeah. Now, the only thing I ever liked about the Wednesday is it's the midst of the week, but you can't have everything, to have the Wednesday and have all the other typology and symbols as well. But the other thing about the idea of 3 days and 3 nights is it is a Hebrew expression of intensity. So it's about the affliction that Jonah felt, not so much about the time span as being exactly the same. Because Jonah is going to experience this affliction in the belly of the fish, and Christ experiences this affliction. I also make an argument that it's actually not referring to the time that he's in the grave, that the heart of the earth is referring to the time when he begins to be treated as a sinner, which I would say even began before the Garden of Gethsemane, that's already weighing on him. But definitely you see that manifest in the Garden of Gethsemane. There he's already in the heart of the earth by then. And he's not dead yet. So the 3 days and 3 nights is more specific to refer to his affliction rather than to the time that he's in the grave. He's not comparing the grave in that sense, the time that he's dead and buried, to the time of Jonah. But the other thing here at this point is that they look at part of a month or part of a day or part of a week as can be a part of the whole. So you just need to understand that Hebrew idiom. So we had a lot of symbolism in here dealing with this temple, the measurements of it. We looked at those, and we're definitely not finished with that. I mean, we have addressed in the past in this movement the measuring of the temple. We looked at, of course, Ezekiel's temple, and when we studied Ezekiel's temple, we also looked at the wilderness tabernacle and some of the symbolism in the measurements there as well. So these are not new ideas. These are things that we've addressed many times. So Solomon's temple, it's, we looked at the cubic cubits. If we just take that one measurement, it's 36,000 cubic cubits, which is 1/4 of 144,000. The most holy place itself, if we take it as the 20 by 20 by 20, you get 8,000 cubic cubits. And then they have that space, whatever they call that, threshold or something. I can't remember the word they used. Entering in of the doors. Let me see. Anyway, there's this other part. It's 4,000 cubic meters. And the other thing was the 5, 6, 7 progression of the heights of the different floors on the side. So you have this 5 cubits, 6 cubits, 7 cubits, a progressive ascent of these. So there's probably a lot more in that that we could see, but we're now just kind of going through our first pass over the field, gleaning. Because, I mean, this is still a gleaning process at this point. So any comments about any of that? Now, we're also it's going to go from Solomon building the temple and then to Solomon building his palace. Now, we have 13 years here. So if we were going to look at our movement and we're going to take 13 years as a symbol, what is 13 years? Stephen?
Like a symbol of rebellion?
Okay.
Thinking? Or
Yeah, so it's a symbol of rebellion. Okay. Can we connect it to the 13th back tune or whatever when we get to that? Would that be another way we would look at it?
you could.
Yeah.
13 times 7. So you have that 20-year period divided by 13 times 7 is 91. And so that covers the 4 times from 677 to 586. The beginning of, the 4 ones when they begin. So the first one begins in 677, and then the last 7 times begins in 586. So you have a 91-year period there. Maybe
Okay.
a bit.
Yeah, well, that's the 70 years plus the 21 years. Yeah, from the start. So from 677 to finally the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem, the captivity of Zedekiah is 91 years. Yeah. Okay, so that does fit in with the symbol of 13, which that one I don't think I'd considered before. At least I don't remember considering it. But that is kind of interesting. I mean, I've noticed the span of times, but just that the number 13 of rebellion, that the 4 7 times are all going to be implemented in a period of 91 years. That's interesting.
You have Seth being born when he's 100, when Adam's 130.
Yeah.
and then Adam's going to die 70 years before the end of the 1,000 years of since
Yeah.
creation.
And lives to be 90.
I don't know. Yeah, so I'm just sort of saying that there's like a 13 and 7,
Okay.
multiple of them anyway. Not scenario. I don't know if there's any connection. I'm just noticing.
Yeah. And of course they're technically we could say there are 13 tribes just because the Levites sort of represent, I guess, in a sense, like with Christ and the 12 disciples, you got 13 as well. And then you have, the week of Christ.
You have 7 nations as well that they enter the promised land to defeat.
Yeah. Yeah. There's 7 nations. Yeah. So there's lots of different symbols there. Now, so we got 7 years for the temple, which is a good period of time for the temple. Of course, technically it's 7 years and 6 months, but described as 7 years. And then 13 years in finishing his house. Now, do we take the position that he completes the temple and then he starts working on his house?
I do.
Is clear evidence on when he starts it?
There's a mention of 20 years that after he finishes building the house, Hiram is given these cities by Solomon, which he's not too happy about.
Okay, so 20 years. Who's not happy?
Hiram.
Forgetting houses?
Forgetting cities.
Or forgetting cities, I mean? Yeah. Yeah, I guess you expect more, right, than just a city in payment. I'm being sarcastic, which I'm not usually. Okay, so so I thought there was a verse or something where it talked about this being 20 years. So it came to pass at the end of 20 years when Solomon had built the 2 houses, the house of the Lord and the king's house. Now, and that would make sense that that's going to be referring to so that would be 24 years into Solomon's reign then, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that seems the best way to address that. I don't see. Yeah, we wouldn't say it's in the 20th year of his reign because it's at the end of the 20 years when Solomon had built the 2 houses. So it's not just talking about like the 20th year of his reign. First Kings. Just looking at these other references. Yeah, it has it in 2 Chronicles 8 as well. Came to pass at the end of 20 years wherein Solomon had built the house of the Lord in his own house. The cities which Hiram had restored to Solomon, Solomon built them and caused the children of Israel to dwell therein. Okay. Maybe we'll probably run into this here in this part as well. Okay. So it came to pass. Oh, that's not where I want to be. I want to be here still. Okay, so Solomon was building his own house 13 years, and he finished all his house. And he built also the house of the forest of Lebanon. The length thereof was 100 cubits, and the breadth thereof 50 cubits, and the height thereof 30 cubits. So you got 50 times 100 times 30. So yeah, you're going to get 45,000 cubits. Upon the 4 rows of cedar pillars with cedar beams upon the pillars. And it was covered with cedar above upon the beams that lay on 45 pillars, 15 in a row. Okay, so we got another 45 there. And there were windows in 3 rows, and light was against light in 3 ranks. And all the doors and posts were square with the windows. And light was against light in 3 ranks. Okay, so we got some symbols here. How would we interpret these symbols?
Where are you getting that number 425?
425? 45, I said. 45.
All right, okay. How do you
It's
get
like,
it? But
it's 45 because
uh-huh.
it says they lay on 45 pillars, 15 in a row. Verse 3.
All right, okay.
Yeah. Plus, if we took the 15, or is it 50 cubits? Did I take 15 cubits? That's 50 by 100 by 30, right?
Yeah, so that's 150,000
Yeah,
cube.
150,000. Okay. Yeah. And then you have this 45 pillars, 15 in a row. So you got these beams, 45 pillars, which that means it's, if there's 15 in a row, there'd be 3 rows, right? So there were windows in 3 rows, and light was against light in 3 ranks. Now, the word rank is 6471. That's the number of Capricorn's constant. That's a stroke. Pa'am. We've run into that word quite a few times. Okay. They call it a rank here instead of a stroke. Okay. And all the doors and posts were square with the windows, and light was against light in 3 ranks. And he made a porch of pillars. The length thereof was 50 cubits, and the breadth thereof 30 cubits, and the porch was before them, and the other pillars and the thick beam were before them. Then he made a porch for the throne, where he might judge, even the porch of judgment, and it was covered with cedar from one side of the floor to the other. And his house, where he dwelt, had another court within the porch, which was of the like work. Solomon made also an house for Pharaoh's daughter, whom he had taken to wife, like unto his porch. All these were costly stones according to the measures of hewed stones, sawed with saws, within and without, and even from the foundation unto the coping, and so on the outside toward the great court. And the foundation was of costly stones, even great stones, stones of 10 cubits, and stones of 8 cubits. And above were costly stones after the measures of hewed stones and cedars. And the great court round about was with 3 rows of hewed stones, and a row of cedar beams, both for the inner court of the house of the Lord and for the porch of the house. Well, it'd be nice to see what this looked like. My imagination, I just see a bunch of stones and a bunch of cedar beams, and quite big structures. So, but quite a few different structures here that are involved with his house. So you can see why it took 13 years to build it. Any comment about his house, his living quarters that he has here for him and the Egyptian queen?
If it's 100 cubits in length, and you're going to have 15 pillars covering that, then you're going to have the middle of each pillar. We don't know how wide they are, but from the middle of one pillar to the middle of the other is going to be 6.66, continuing on distance cubits between each.
Centers or whatever you want to call it, like basically just.
Yeah, just from the center of the pillar to the center of the next pillar.
Okay.
It's going to be 6.66 cubits. I don't know.
Just because of the proportions between the length of 100 cubits and you're saying 15.
I'm just taking 100 cubits and divide it by 15.
Yeah, okay, that's what I thought. Yeah, so you get this. 6.666666, etc. Okay, so that's interesting.
So they're all, you said all sixes? So they're all sixes?
Yeah, all just sixes. Yeah.
That's kind of, it is interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, and so we have some, and the reason why that's interesting, I should tell you why, because we have 45 and we have 666. What is that? What's the 45? So back in verse 3, there's 45 pillars, 15 in a row. Okay.
45th president.
Well, we would go back to the 1843 chart for 45 years, right?
Yeah.
That's going to be our primary reference. Then we know there's 46 years to 1844, but Miller's chart has 45 because he's going to 1843. And that's connected to the 1335, right?
Yeah. It's less than 46, ain't it?
What's less than 46?
Yeah.
What's less than 46?
Well, you got 45 pillars in the temple, right?
Well, this isn't the temple. This is Solomon's house.
Oh, okay. I'm apologizing.
But yeah, there's 45, right? So I'm just saying that relates to 666 because you have 666 years of Miller that go to 508, and then the 1335 to go to 1843. And that 1335 has, you can cut 1290 off of that to get the 45. So I'm just saying there's a relationship between 45 and 666 in Miller's understanding of prophecy. So if we're looking at Solomon's house and we're looking at these descriptions and we just started looking at them, I've never really looked at the measurements of Solomon's house before. But we can see some symbols that show that Solomon's house has connections to the prophetic message, right? So however we're going to understand Solomon, however we're going to apply Solomon, the third angel's message, to our message, we can see it contains some of the same symbolism. And again, we have this description of Solomon's house in the Bible. Writing a book, that's a pretty precious resource. They're not just filling up a bunch of space for no reason, right?
Yeah, well, it would have been nice if he'd been 46. That's where it'd have been. There'd been 46 chromosomes in the body.
But this isn't the temple. This is Solomon's house.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Jeff, you had a comment?
So yeah, these numbers just keep popping up.
Yeah.
No matter what the temple or his house or whatever.
Yeah, all kinds of ways. Yeah. But the point I'm making here is that here we have the Bible. It's using this valuable resource, the time it takes to write something out on, some vellum or whatever, that they're going to write it out. So they're not wasting a bunch of words. All of these things are important. And I don't know how some people can just say, well, that part, that's not really important. They didn't even need to have that there in the Bible. That's what people could say. Why do we need this part of the Bible? Why do we need to know how many pillars there were? They could just say Solomon built his house. But obviously the Bible doesn't say that. They could have said it was a magnificent house. It was really, really big. It had lots of pillars and lots of stones but no, it's going to give us some details about how big it is, how many cubits, how many posts were used. So it is important because it's in the Bible. It's not just there randomly. Now, of course, we know that lots of the things that we find, they actually relate to our message directly. And, that's just God's hand in it. So we haven't covered this completely yet. Now we know there's these stones of 10 cubits and stones of 8 cubits. I'm not sure what that means particularly as a symbol, why we have the 10 and why we have the 8. We keep having these 3 rows, so we get the number 3 in there. So that would relate to the third angel's message. Okay. And then it's going to go from his house and it's going to go back to the temple. So it's going to deal with the temple furnishings. And King Solomon sent and fetched Hiram out of Tyre, he and his widow's son of the tribe of Naphtali. And his father was a man of Tyre, a worker in brass, and he was filled with wisdom. Okay, he's a widow's son of the tribe. He was a widow. I thought, wasn't he a son of Dan? Well, the mother of Hiram, not the Tyrian king mentioned here, but an intelligent coppersmith of Jewish extraction by his mother's side. And Chronicles is said to be in the daughters of Dan. Okay, that's what I thought. And she might have been of Naphtali by her father and Dan by her mother. Or she might originally been of the tribe of Dan and have been first married to a man of the tribe of Naphtali. And in either case, she might be indifferently called of the tribe of Naphtali or of the daughters of Dan. So of the daughters of Dan, I guess that would refer to a mother then. That's what they're trying to say there. But of the tribe of Naphtali. And so that's his mother. Now, he's the widow's son. So she's a widow. So yeah, so there's different ways in which that could be interpreted. We could, I don't know if Ellen White comments on this verse or not. You can see. Yeah, she comments on it. Not a direct referent quote of it or anything. Okay, she's got a little bit here. The Phoenician king responded by sending Huram, the son of the woman of the daughters of Dan, and his father was a man of Tyre. So Ellen White is going to quote, it must be 2 Chronicles 2 verse 7, or 2 verse 14. So I'm going to have to go there. So she's not quoting this one in 1 Kings 7 verse 14. Yeah, she's going to quote 2 Chronicles 2. Okay, so 2 Chronicles 2, the son of a woman of the daughters of Dan, and his father was a man of Tyre. Okay, so she's going to, son of the women of the daughters of Dan, the women's of the daughters of Dan, but of the tribe of Naphtali. So again, they could say that she could have just been married to somebody who was of the tribe of Naphtali. Now, his father was a man of Tyre, so I don't think he would have been of Naphtali. So I would think it's just that, I don't know. I don't know what the right answer is. There are different options, I guess. So anyway, he's not like an Israelite. He's part Israelite. A worker in brass, and he was filled with wisdom and understanding and cunning work and all works of brass. And he came to the king Solomon and wrought all his work. For he cast 2 pillars of brass of 18 cubits high apiece, and a line of 12 cubits did compass either of them about. So what is the circumference of these pillars? How far across, if the circumference, if a line goes around the pillars 12 cubits, the circumference is 12 cubits, right? So what would be the measurement of these pillars, assuming they're just circular columns, not square? Because it would be different if they were square pillars, but usually they're going to be circular, right? Everybody understand what I'm talking about there? I'm going to try to find this measurement. Okay, so my arms are like 6 feet. Those would be pretty big pillars if their circumference is 12 cubits.
So like 3.8 roughly cubits.
The wide?
Are you not just taking 12 and then dividing it by 3.14?
Okay. Okay, so we got, now if we use the 25.2 inch cubit, which I don't want to use because I think it'd just be an 18-inch cubit. Okay, so we have different parts of this these pillars as well. He made 2 chapiters of molten brass and set upon the tops of the pillars. The height of the one chapiter or capiter was 5 cubits, and the height of the other capiter was 5 cubits. and the nets of checker work and wreaths of chain work for the chapiters, whatever that word is. Kothenret in Hebrew, which were upon the top of the pillars, 7 for the one chapiter and 7 for the other chapiter. He made the pillars and 2 rows round about upon one network to cover the chapiters that were upon the top with pomegranates, and so did he for the other chapiter. The chapiters that were upon the top of the pillars were of lily work in the porch, 4 cubits. And the chapiters upon the 2 pillars had pomegranates also above and over against the belly, which was by the network, and the pomegranates were 200 in rows round about upon the other chapiter. And he set up the pillars in the porch of the temple, and he set up the right pillar and called the name thereof Yakin, and he set up the left pillar and called the name thereof Boaz. And the top of the pillars was lily work. So was the work of the pillars finished. Right. So just dealing with these pillars. Okay. So if we have the 18, okay, let me see here. Now, what about a 21-inch cubit? So I'd like to get this, because so we got 18-inch, we could have a 21-inch cubit. I want to convert this into inches, feet, or whatever. Yeah, they give us all these different measurements, right? And numbers of things. So we got the 18-inch common cubit or the 21-inch royal cubit. If we do that, so the height is 216 inches, 12 cubits by 18 inches. I thought the height was 18 cubits. That's the circumference that's 12. Okay, so the circumference, that's what it is. Circumference is 216 inches, which is the cube of 6. 6 times 6 times 6, right? Okay. So the height, 18 by 18, is 324 inches. The total height with the capiters is 414 inches with the 18-inch cubit. So the 21-inch cubit, 12 by 21, we all know that's 252 inches. So what do we usually assume about the cubits used for building the temple? Do we usually assume an 18-inch cubit or a 21-inch cubit? Or do we just use both? We know Ezekiel uses a 21-inch cubit, right? It is by a cubit and a hand's breadth. Is there any way that we could assume a 21-inch cubit here? But the circumference of the pillar is 252 inches.
If the height is 18 cubits,
Yeah.
you're using the 18-inch
Yeah,
cubit.
18 by 18, yeah.
So you have, so that's 324. And that is not the dates of the 21 days where Daniel fasts. He finishes fast in Daniel chapter 10 on the 24th day of the first month. So therefore he began it on the 3rd day of the first month. So you have a 3-2-4 connection there. But also 2520 divided by 777 is 3.24. 3.24 continues.
Oh, okay. Okay, so that's interesting. Yeah, so we don't know, at least I don't know, which cubit they used in this these measurements here. So we could have the 18 or the 21, maybe they both show different things. If the total height is 23 cubits by 21 inches, you get 483. So that's the 490 minus the week of Christ, right?
Say it again.
483.
How did you get that?
That's 23 cubits. That's taking the chapiters and the whole thing all together because they're 5 cubits, right? Plus 18 is 23 times 21 is 483.
Right, okay.
So that gives you 7 less than 490. So that's 69 weeks. So the 18-inch cubit produces a 216, the 21-inch cubit a 252. So both of them give us a symbol. Okay, and then just we've looked at this before, but just dealing with the names of these pillars, is there anything that we further could draw from their meaning or any symbols associated with them? Because we got Yakin, he will establish, and then you got Boaz, fleetness.
A 17-inch cubit would give you 391.
Yeah, but I don't think they have 17-inch cubits. But well, it's interesting. Yakin is the Hebrew number is 3199, so you have the 391 in there as at least the digits of it. And Boaz is 1162, so you have the 126 in there, but just you have a repetition of the 1, just as you have a repetition of the 9 in the other. I know we spend a lot of time looking at these numbers, which could be really boring videos, but it's just the process, right? This is the process we go through. We look at these numbers, we look at the meanings of the names, and so once we have all of the symbols, then we can kind of put them together.
So Boaz, he was his, great grandfather of Solomon?
Mm-hmm.
So would you have like 4 generations maybe connection there?
Could be, yeah. That puts Solomon, in the 4th generation. Okay. Now, what about Yakin? He will establish the 4th son of Simeon, founder of the family of the Yakinites. Priest and head of the 21st course at the time of David, post-exilic priest in the time of Nehemiah, and the name of the right-hand pillar before the temple. So you got 4 different ways. But, the question was, why does he name them this? Is he naming them after these people? It's just kind of strange that they're naming these pillars. Angela?
Yeah, I was going to say, you might jump on me for this, but I read that the Masons, the Freemasons, the secret society, so-called, regarded the twin towers as Yakin and Boaz.
Okay, well, that's interesting.
Yeah, so they have modeled some of their buildings somewhat on this temple. So we got the counterfeit there.
Yeah, well, one of the things I know about the Masons, which I don't know a great deal, I mean, I've read lots, but whether the things I read are true or not, it's hard to know. And I did have, like, my English teacher from high school was a Mason. He's a very, very strange fellow. I'm not going to tell you about him. But yeah, they always talk about Solomon. There's all Solomon's wisdom and all the secret knowledge and everything like that. So could we say that because who's naming these pillars? Is this Solomon naming them? Because, I mean, you understand when it says he in Hebrew, it's hard to know sometimes who it's referring to. Now, we're going to have, he made the pillars, he cast them, he did all this work. Well, that's going to be this guy, Hiram, fetched Hiram out of Tyre. So this is going to be Hiram. Is Hiram naming these pillars, is the question.
Is there anything in the SOP about this? Because I was going through it and I haven't yet found it, so.
Well, where she mentions the pillars by name?
Yeah, like who named them and why were they named that, or did she write about it at all?
Well, she mentions the pillars one place where she just quotes the verse. That's the only time she mentions them. And that's Lessons from the Life of Solomon, number 8. So we've read some of those articles from Review and Herald. Right. Yeah, so we don't know who named them, at least from this text. I get the impression that the worker, Hiram, is going to name them, but that doesn't really make a lot of sense that he's going to pick these particular names. And why would he name them, right? Just seems kind of odd if he would do that. So even though it keeps talking about Hiram doing all these things, I would still think that the naming would be done by Solomon. And when it says he set up the left pillar and he set up the right pillar. Now, what does this also remind us of, though? Like, we got a left and a right pillar. Now, you sort of referenced the Twin Towers. Is there anything else we could understand about these pillars? What they would represent?
I was thinking about the verse in the Bible where it talks about there'd be pillars in the house of God.
Yeah, that's a good one, William. But I was thinking this is a big waymark with us too, 9/11. So
I think she is referring to the 144,000 being the pillars in the house of God, right?
Yeah. Well, here, we could take them as those two main waymarks, that 9/11 and 11/9, maybe. I don't know. So it could mean God will establish in strength the naming of the pillars, according to this commentary here. Okay, and then, it's going to talk about the Molten Sea, 10 cubits from one brim to the other, and it was round about, and his height was 5 cubits, and a line of 30 cubits did compass it round about. So it's a radius of 5 cubits, right? That's what it says. And then what is its circumference? 30 cubits, right? Is that what it says? How are we reading this? Okay. Yeah, 721 being the midnight symbol. Yeah. One dealing with pillars.
Just you have the 9/11 building number 7 coming down as well. So that was the Solomon building, it was called. So not quite Solomon, but very close.
Okay. Anyway, so we got all these measurements and numbers all over the place. Okay, so if we have this molten sea, I want to see how much it holds. Okay, so we got, so you got 30 by 10. So the circumference is 10. I guess that's the best way to look at it. And then the circumference is 30, which means pi is 3. But this is sometimes brought up as an argument against how the Bible isn't aware of pi, and that this would be an impossible thing to build. So what are they missing out here regarding the measurements of this molten sea? Wouldn't you have to take into consideration the thickness of the vessel itself?
Yeah, so I think that connects with the handbreadth.
Yeah. Right. So we got a handbreadth. So, okay, he made the molten sea 10 cubits from one brim to the other, round all about, and his height was 5 cubits. The line of 30 cubits did compass it round about. So that's the circumference. And under the brim of it round about, there were knobs compassing it 10 in a cubit, compassing the sea round about, and the knobs were cast in 2 rows when it was cast. It doesn't say anything about the brim here.
Yeah, so it's kind of just short of pi. So I think I remember seeing Kent Hovind doing this here. He's just saying that the rim would have been just taking it up to pi, the measurement.
Yeah.
So it's sort of measured for the inside, and then the outside would be, or something.
Yeah, I know I've done this before in the past because I've discussed this with people on the internet in the past. But yeah, so you would, because obviously they're going to be able to measure and see how big things are. Now somebody could say, well, they're just, averaging or just rounding down the length of it or rounding up. So the thickness of the brim being a hand's breadth. That's verse 26. Okay, so I just missed that somehow. And it was a handbreadth thick, and the brim thereof was wrought like the brim of a cup with flowers of lilies. It contained 2,000 baths. Okay, so I just didn't read. I didn't read ahead. because it stood upon 12 oxen, 3 looking toward the north, 3 looking toward the west, 3 looking toward the south, 3 looking toward the east. And the sea was set above upon them, and all their hinder parts were inward. Now, I used to have a guitar student who was a doctor, and he was a Mormon. And they built a Mormon temple in Edmonton. And he wanted me to go see it before it was dedicated. So you actually go get to see. You could never enter into a Mormon temple after it's been dedicated, the temple part. So I went on a tour of the Mormon temple, and they had their baptismal font, which a solid gold oxen. From what I remember, there was just 4, though, holding it up. I don't think they had 12. It just looks so odd, like, to see something like that in real life. But anyway, here he has these oxen in which the basin, the sea, sits upon. So the handbreadth thick. What that would do is in the calculation. Okay, so I have the calculation here. It's rather complicated. The outer diameter, the inner circumference, the thickness. I can write a formula for it. So it's 10 equals 30 over pi plus 2t, 2 being the thickness. So you have to take in 2 of those thicknesses because it's on either side. So the thickness is 0.225. And so that's pretty accurate compared to what a handbreadth is. And of course, whatever measurement you use, whether you use a cubit of 18 or 21, it'll still always be proportional. Interesting. Okay. 5.67 inches, which is the same as that 567 thing we have. Okay. So there's definitely some symbolism in there. So the cylinders represents the law of government. The lily brim represents grace. I don't know if I agree with that. Yeah. So the basic idea is that it's not an error. It has to do with an actual practical measurement to take the thickness of the vessel. So they're measuring inside what the measurement is inside. So, I mean, we can't figure out the volume exactly, I don't think, of how much it would hold. But that's the last calculation I'm going to do before we finish here today. We think, how would that be? I guess square cubits, we'd probably want it in cubic feet. So in 1 Kings 7:26, it says it contained 2,000 baths. Right there, you can see at the bottom there. In 2 Chronicles 4, verse 5, it received and held 3,000 baths. So if we do the calculation, it holds 375 cubic cubits, which is the gematria of the name Solomon. So there's 8 baths per cubit if you take the 3,000 baths. Now also it could just be, there's a difference between it contained 2,000 baths. I know our time is up. But so it contained 2,000 baths. That's the word 3557. Okay. And then 2 Chronicles 4, verse 5. It received and held 3,000 baths. So a different word. So could that just be referring to its actual capacity compared to what they actually put in it? Yeah. Okay. And Angela has a message there about her landlord that we'll pray for. Okay. Any final thoughts before we close with prayer? Okay, let's pray. Dear Father in heaven, we are thankful for the time that we have had. We know that there's lots of symbols here, and it takes time to understand these things. So we just pray for wisdom. And we pray for Angela's landlord. You know the situation. And we just ask for your Holy Spirit to continue to plead not just with him, but with us as well. We ask that you can bless the rest of our day and the studies tomorrow evening and on Sabbath, and that we can continue to learn and grow in our personal study and walk with you. So again, we thank you and we pray in Jesus' name. Amen.